Back inside the Pirate Radio Zoom room, brought to you by U.S. Cellular and Toby Williams at Cellular Warehouse. You can call 252-799-7051. They can hook you up with home internet service. Also, White Claw Hard Seltzer, proudly distributed by Coastal Beverage Company, and your CBD store next to Doug Donuts on Arlington Boulevard. Joining us today is the play-by-play voice for ECU Baseball, Corey Gloor, in the house. Hello, Corey.
Hello, Clip Brock. How are you?
I am making it, doing all right, and I wanted to get you on today to, I guess, talk about the baseball season that never was. If you look at the calendar, we would be, Corey, either done with the season or, I like to think, heading to a super regional at this time, as ECU was just a year ago. What's it been like for you to be a baseball announcer with no baseball to call?
Right after the season ended, it was very strange because you're still very much in the flow of things, and then it all came to a halt as time went on and this world around us changed and the priorities changed.
Yeah.
And so now we're far removed, frankly, from when the season was, and with everything that's been going on, it feels like it was forever ago, frankly. And to the point where when I've actually been out recently and run into some of the guys from the program, it feels like it's been like years since I've seen some of these guys. It's been, these are not normal times, and baseball feels like it was a long, long time ago.
You're right about that. And also, Corey, it's almost like we're going to be able to hit a reset button if baseball returns in 2021, because a lot of the Pirates we thought would be gone after the 2020 season will be back. You look at some of the arms and Tyler Smith and Matt Bridges, Cam Colmore, Jason Dietrich going to be able to work with those guys in 2021. It's gonna be odd. I'm thinking we're going to lose Alec Burleson. Something tells me that. We'll see about Gavin Williams and Bryson Worrell, I think, is a fantastic prospect. But, Corey, we could be seeing the same team you called back in February in 2021 for the most part.
Yeah, by and large, you're going to. And some of the guys on the 2020 team that were sporadic in the mix have left. And so there are some names that will be different. But you mentioned some of the big ones that now the possibility of them being back in 21 is much greater than if this would have been a normal situation and the season hadn't stopped and the draft wasn't restructured. And so the guys that you just mentioned that should be having their names called in the not too distant future, and if the draft were bigger, would definitely have heard their names called. Now there is a question as to whether or not we might see them again. And those guys, I think there are two guys mainly that you think of when it comes to the draft, Alec Burleson and Gavin Williams. They will have probably a decision to make here coming up. If they're drafted, if it's all about the number at this point for these guys. They know that they're top 5 talent. If they're picked in the top 5, does the number match what they're looking for? Do they say, you know what, this isn't what I was looking for? I have 2 years now to actually better my case with you instead of just one had I declined you. There's a lot of things that they need to weigh. And if they're not drafted, if for some reason nobody picks Alec Burleson in the top 5 rounds, which would be a joke, but if for some reason he falls out, is he going to sign for 20 grand?
Right.
He's worth so much more than that. Same with Gavin. And you mentioned Bryson Worrell, who, we know the talent's there, and I think he's in a similar boat. There are a lot of questions coming up for these guys, and they're the only ones that are going to be able to answer them.
I talked to Jay Washer recently and brought up the 5-round draft this year, and he said, he was very thankful he went the previous year or he wouldn't have been drafted. And now the question is, how many rounds will there be in the 2021 draft? Because you're talking about possibly contracting minor league teams. How many roster spots will even be out there for professional baseball players in the MLB organization and minor league baseball? So that's another thing you have to weigh if you are not drafted in the first 5 rounds and you think, Do I want that 20 to sign, or should I just go back in next year's draft? Well, how many rounds are in next year's draft? So a lot of things to think about with this thing, Corey.
Well, and I think Major League Baseball has I've been relatively vocal of Major League Baseball here of late. They have used everything going on with the pandemic to get their position solidified against minor league baseball, and it's very clear that it's going to work now. They want a 20-round draft, and I think that's where this is going to eventually wind up. Whether it gets back to 40 next year to kind of compensate for everything that's going on this year, I don't know. But 20 is where they want to get it, and they will cut out minor league teams and have fewer jobs in order to do that. I watched the interview you did with Jake, and he said something that I've kind of thought throughout all this as well. With 5-round draft, he mentioned about teams might be more cognizant of maybe going after high school players in this draft, and maybe reaching for a high school guy because you can take longer to develop them instead of going for someone that's an immediate impact or a closer impact that would cost more money. And I've kind of thought the same lines. I don't know if that's going to happen because the guys at the top, first 3-4 picks, are all going to be college guys. But I thought similar to what Washer mentioned to you the last time you did this, was that teams are looking much more long term in terms of how they spread out their financials, not necessarily their talent, but their financials. And for them, I think they will, certainly when it comes to signing, if the guys who aren't picked in the first 5 rounds, I think you'll see a lot of high school kids sign for 20 grand because it's frankly just going to be cheaper in the long run for them to do that.
Corey Gloor joining us. Thanks for watching, by the way, Corey.
Yeah, absolutely. I've enjoyed it. You and I have talked about this. I've loved what you've done with that.
I asked you before we went on because I couldn't remember exactly how long you've been around here calling ECU baseball, and it's a little longer than I thought. You've called 3 ECU regionals, 2 at home, 1 on the road, 2 wins, 1 loss. Let's take a trip down memory lane real quick. Let's relive that Virginia regional. We were talking about that with, I think, Ronnie Woodward earlier in the week on the show. About, you look back on it, man, what a great win against Virginia. Then they go and win the next day and win the thing. But that Virginia game, it was almost like all hope was lost. Really, the comeback came out of nowhere. That was, of course, capped off by the Watkins big fly.
That was a really aggravating game to watch because there were opportunities left and right throughout that the Pirates weren't able to capitalize on, and they were leaving guys on base for the rest of time.
How many games have you called, Corey, where all those runners left on base come back to haunt you, right? It usually
that's the sport.
Way.
Yeah, that's the sport. If you're going to hit double digits and left on base, then you have a much better shot losing than winning. And that game it just seemed like every inning they had an opportunity to do something, and they couldn't figure out a way to do it. And then the 9th inning happened where it just all of a sudden base runner, base runner, base runner, base runner, base runner, and then the Watkins homer. Virginia put in their closer, who I believe pitched the day before, like just a quick inning against William and Mary, and they never grabbed him. It was clear he was on fumes, and they left him out there, and that's what happened. And that changed. I think that changed, frankly, a lot of people's view of what that 2016 season was. I mean, they're going to win that regional, and so now we look at that team differently. But that team throughout the year was pretty up and down, and that Virginia game really kind of encapsulated that. There was no winning streak longer than 3, no losing streak longer than 3 throughout that season. Like, it was a wild up and down year that game was really kind of a glimpse as to what that season was. And then they were able to come back to beat William and Mary. People forget that they had to rally back a few times in that game to win that regional as well. I mean, that was a wild weekend that kind of came out of the blue. The talent was there, just putting the pieces together didn't quite happen for a lot of that year until that weekend.
And then you think the last year, Quinnipiac knocking off ECU on that Friday, and boy, there was a lot of angry Pirate fans and sad Pirate fans leaving Clark LeClaire. But you come back with the Jake Agnos performance against NC State. You get Jake Washer just going insane and getting on a hot streak there late. I think Bryson Worrell dropped a tank or two there in the regional. And I also think about Gavin Williams, who it's not like he was a myth, but he was starting a big game against Campbell, and we're like, all right, what's this guy going to have? And he's out there throwing what, Corey? You were there. I was watching from home. 96, 97 or something
I
at
mean,
the gate.
he hit 100 in the
Okay.
first inning,
Yeah.
and that was the only time that season he hit 100.
And he threw he was throwing strikes with 100, not just, the adrenaline was going, but he was locked in.
Yeah, and he had pitched the day before. He had thrown. What day did he throw? I think the Quinnipiac loss was Saturday night. Remember, because of the rain.
Friday got lightning.
And so
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and so it was late Saturday night, and I believe that's when Gavin initially threw in the regional. He was kind of a gap bridger in Saturday, and that he was unavailable for the 2 games Sunday, and he kind of demanded the ball for the final game from Cliff Godwin. I mean, Jake Agnos coming out and doing what he did against NC State. I mean, he was pushed past capacity. He was at 130 something pitches into the 9th, and in every other circumstance, he would have never gone that far. But they needed him to throw into the 9th, and that's what he did. And then to come back to beat Quinnipiac again, and that's when the big boys really started getting going. Like, was that second game against Quinnipiac. Packard hit a home run. Washer hit 2 home runs in that game. And that just, once that happened, the whole dynamic of it really started to change. But if you lose game 1 at home, you're the 1 seed to a 4 seed whose reason they got into the tournament was a very good week in their conference tournament. They were up and down the whole year. Moods are going to be down a little bit. It started with what Agnos did, saying, we're good here. Like, I'm good with, I got you here. And then everyone else kind of towed the line the rest of the way. It was an absolutely bonkers weekend. And I mean, the number is 5%, I think, and maybe even lower, of teams that lose the first game and win a regional. To do it in the compressed time frame that they had to do. It was 4 games in 35 hours. I mean, and they won them all. I mean, that's never going to be done again. Like, it shouldn't be done again, and it's never going to happen like that again for any school.
The odds are definitely against you in that scenario. Corey, we'll wrap it up, but I want to say I love the way that Greenville and the surrounding area connects, and even online, and we'll get to that in a moment, connects with the ECU baseball program. And people have really missed the skipper, Cliff Godwin, and his intensity, their third base coach, and they've missed seeing the players. They miss Coach O. They miss you, the voice of ECU baseball, Corey Gloor. And I always bring it up with you. You do a fantastic job of connecting with your audience. And I love the fact that you interact with the listeners during the games. And I've brought it up with you a lot of times, but you're like an honorary ECU Pirate at this point, Corey Gloor, the way you connect with everybody. But I know you really enjoy that, and I can tell you the fans do as well.
It's something that I wanted to do pretty early on when I started here, because I was very foreign to here. I mean, I didn't know much about the school, the baseball program, the history here, and the passion of here. So one of the things that I wanted to do, I remember the very first weekend that I was calling games here was against Longwood, and a man by the name of Clip Brock tweeted out, my predecessor, Paul Roper, who did the 2015 season. Paul Roper's not calling games, and I refuse to accept this, something like that. And then Paul reached out to you and it's like, it's Corey doing this. He's a great guy. Give him a listen. And that's how it started. I mean, I kind of jumped in blindly to a lot of what was going on here. I love calling games, and I've called baseball for a long time. And so initially it was, don't screw this up. Like that this is a big job for me, a big moment for me. And it's like, all right, walk on eggshells and try not to disrupt the apple cart sort of thing. And don't grab attention unwarrantedly. And when I got a firm grasp or a better grasp as to how people treat this program and revere the athletics here, that's when I realized that I need to learn a lot more about this place. And part of what I've tried to do over the years, and I'm still working on it, is to get to hear from people who love this program and love these programs, because that I know when push comes to shove, if you're listening to an ECU baseball game, you're not listening for me. You're listening because of the program. You want to know what they're doing, and you want them to win. You want them to be as good as possible. I am the conduit of that. I tell you what's going on. If I can entertain you along the way, that's great. If I can inform you of what's happening, that's the goal. And if I can find the right mix of doing both of those, then I feel like I've done a damn good job at what I'm trying to do. And hearing from people who are listening in, who are watching, and hearing feedback from them, both positive and negative, influences a lot of what I do and helps shape me as a broadcaster overall and of this team. So I will always try and be connected to the fan base here because I know how important this is to you. And that means everything to me.
I think you do a great job, and I think people would agree and really connect with you. And you know, you're almost part of the game now. Like, and you have to be here a few years for the audience to connect with you. But it's like you're either watching the game with them, or most of the time you're watching the game for them if it's on the road. And it's a great experience. I'm a radio guy, so you know I love especially baseball on the radio. Something about it different than football and basketball. But enough kissing Corey's ass. Let's wrap this up. Corey, one more thing. Your beard and hair looking good, man. You were looking a little like me not too long ago. Now you look good.
You can pull that off, though. I was at a stage of very, like, people were worried. Like, so I got it taken care of. And
Yeah.
well, the first time I actually looked in the mirror after all this happened was startling. Like, I was like, I don't know what this is. Like, I haven't seen this in months. So it was, I'm glad I got a lot of stuff taken care of.
Corey, thanks for hanging out, man. Maybe there'll be some Bucks basketball, playoff basketball for you to watch soon. I figured you were rocking it. Yes, sir.
If they go to a group stage World Cup style for the NBA, I will lose my mind. Just
all
so
right.
clear.
That'll be on part 2 of our chat coming up in a couple months. All right. Thank you, Corey. There's Corey Gloor in the Pirate Radio Zoom room, brought to you by Cellular Warehouse, your local U.S. Cellular authorized agent. Also, White Claw, Hard Seltzer, and your CBD store. We will see you next time.